Alright, this is a video done by request of you guys online, so I hope it works out alright. Okay, there's a lot of stuff on the board right now, and the reason is because pronouns is kind of a big topic. So I'm going to try to start off, of course, really basic, and then I'll get into the categories. I just put this up on the board so I wouldn't forget about it. Alright, first of all, pronouns, it's kind of basic. We all do it inherently. If you're talking to your friend Johnny, if you're retelling the story, you might say, I, that's a pronoun, was talking to him standing in place of Johnny. And we're actually going to look at that to get a really important concept. So let's say your teacher, let's say me, Mr. McCord, was talking to Johnny. So I'm going to write that sentence up on the board real quick. I'm going to grab my black marker. Here it is. So I filled it most of the board, but we'll use this one. So Mr. McCord was talking to Johnny. Okay, hopefully that sentence you can see that all right. Mr. McCord was talking to Johnny. We're going to replace Johnny with a pronoun because a pronoun is just a word that stands pro or in place of. So it's a noun that takes the place of another noun. If you need kind of help about the basic idea of pronouns, I'm sure there's a Schoolhouse Rock song on it. Anyway, so Mr. McCord was talking to Johnny. And I often ask my students, okay, what pronoun would take the place of Johnny? And there's a really important lesson that we get from it. Mr. McCord was talking to her. No, that doesn't sound right. So it's not her. So I make sure they understand it. Her wouldn't work. We're going to get to why in a second. Mr. McCord was talking to them. No, that doesn't work either. The correct pronoun would be Mr. McCord was talking to him. Him would be the correct pronoun. Okay? Now the important, very, very important thing that this simple example illustrates is that pronouns always match the noun they modify. They always match the noun they modify in gender and number. For example, if you're talking to students, you're not talking to him because it's not plural like students is. Students is plural, him is singular. Or Mr. McCord was talking to her if you're talking to a boy, or him if you're talking to a girl. No, it doesn't work. They have to match in gender and in number. Gender and number. So if you're replacing a singular noun, no matter where you're using it, it has to be singular pronoun. If you're replacing a masculine noun, it has to be a masculine pronoun. Okay, so that's really, really important. Otherwise, though, pronouns can change in any way. So if we take this example, let's take Johnny. In this sentence, Johnny is an indirect object, or in this case, he's the object of the preposition to. Okay, so Mr. McCord was talking to Johnny, Mr. McCord was talking to him. So in this sentence, the pronoun him would be correct. But let's take another sentence, like Johnny threw a spear. Johnny threw a spear. And I'm going to replace Johnny with a blank first. So blank threw a spear. Okay, and Johnny, keep in mind is Johnny. Well, before Johnny was him, because Mr. McCord was talking to him. But now notice, Johnny is the subject of our sentence. Johnny threw a spear. So instead of in English where you would take the indirect object pronoun him, now we're going to take the subject pronoun in English, and that would be she. No, Johnny's not a she. They. No, Johnny's not plural, but singular. So it's just going to be he threw a spear. Okay? All right, so this is probably the most important thing. I know we haven't even gotten into Latin, but this is maybe the most important thing to realize is that pronouns always match the nouns they stand in place of in gender, in number. Gender and number. Let's do one last one. He threw a spear. Well, spear in Latin and in English, it's going to be neuter. So if you do telum or husta or husta is actually feminine. But anyway, and I can't think of the pilum. Two of those are neuter. So let's act like it's neuter. He threw a spear. He threw it. He threw it. So now we've replaced Johnny with the masculine singular pronoun and a spear with the singular neuter pronoun. Okay, and if you don't get that, take a second and kind of think about that. Think about maybe a song or a painting, or painting probably doesn't work, but anyway, your day, and think about some pronouns and how you interchange those, how they always match in number and gender. Okay, and once you've got that, you're ready to go on to the Latin idea. Latin, just like English, has a bunch of different kinds of pronouns. So I'm going to start with probably the most basic or the simplest ones, what we call personal pronouns. I hope that comes through all right. Personal pronouns. Any Latin grammar, whether you guys might use Wheelock's or Cambridge or Oxford, or sorry, Cambridge or Oxford, whatever you use, they'll have a section on personal pronouns. So this would be the he, she, it. In Latin, is, id. I, ega. Not like the waffle, ego. That would be Greek. And nos. For example, if you know Spanish or you've heard Spanish, is nosotros somos, we are. So ega and nos would be the first person singular. And tu and vos. Again, there are obvious Spanish overlaps there as well as other languages. But so we've got I, ega, that's the nominative form. Nos, that's the plural nominative form, we. Tu, singular second person, you. Vos, plural second person, y'all if you're from Texas, vos. And then the third person, I've got the singular up here, is, ea, it. Masculine, feminine, neuter. One thing to observe is that the personal pronouns for the first person and second person don't have gender. So there's not like an I feminine and an I masculine and an I neuter. It's just I, just ega. Okay? Now these personal pronouns all decline. And I don't have a ton of time to go into all of that today in this lesson. Use the reference grammar on the back and you could see like is, eus, eum, eo, pardon me. So that would be the singular declension of is, and sure enough, you'd see the same thing for all the others. Don't have a ton of time to count on that. Those are just normal pronouns, I, you, we, y'all, or he, she, it, or they. Okay. All right, so those are your personal pronouns, and they would function just like you would in English. So let's do a simple sentence with that. Let's say, Kaiser, Telum, Yucket. Caesar threw a spear. Okay, basic enough. Now remember the question we need to ask if we're going to replace Kaiser and Telum with pronouns, right? We have to figure out whether what the gender is and what the number is, and then we'll ask what the case is. So in this case, the gender of Caesar is masculine. The number of Caesar is singular. And in this sentence, Caesar is the subject, so he needs to be in the nominative case. Remember, the case just tells you the function of the noun. Okay, so Caesar throws the spear. Well, we need then masculine, singular, nominative. And if you went to a chart or something and it's a third person, you'd see you need here is. So is. Do the same thing with Telum. Telum is a neuter noun and it's singular. So neuter, singular. In this case, it's the direct object. So it would be in the accusative case. And that would be id if you went to your chart. If you saw the third person, neuter, singular, accusative, you'd see id. So this would actually be is, id, and I'm getting nervous as if it's, I always confuse yucere and yucere. So let me look this up real quick. See, even Latin teachers sometimes have to look things up, especially when they're super nervous. So let's see here if I got it right. Yes, I got it right. Woohoo! Okay, so it'd be is, id, yucket. He threw it, or he throws it. Okay, so that would be, and we could change it, we could do I threw it or whatever. Ega yuckeo telum, or ega id yuckeo. I throw it. Okay, so pronouns, again, you've got to ask about gender and number, and then you ask your normal case question. Is it the subject, the direct object, the indirect object? Is it modifying it as a genitive, object, the preposition, etc.? Okay, so that's pretty good. Usually my students get that pretty well. The second classes I'm going to spend probably more time on are called reflexive pronouns. Now, the more advanced you get in Latin grammar, the more rules there are about reflexives, or the more you see them functioning in really advanced clauses. So I'm going to take one example of English just to kind of show how reflexives work or don't work. All right, clear up a little more space. In general, reflexives only get difficult in more complex Latin, like second-year Latin, or third semester Latin if you're doing college, or second semester Latin. So here we could take a sentence like, let's say Brutus killed his friend. Brutus killed his friend. Well, in English this is actually a pretty vague sentence. Pretty vague sentence. Is this Brutus's friend, or is this somebody else's friend? Like Brutus killed Cicero's friend? Or Brutus killed Brutus's friend, his own friend. Whose friend has been killed? Is it Brutus's or Cicero's? Well, in Latin, the way we would differentiate that is we would take a reflexive possessive. So if we were trying to say Brutus killed his own friend, friend, of course, right, amicum. So let's say Brutus killed his own friend. You could either do a reflexive, amicum sui. That would be a reflexive genitive pronoun. Again, look in the back of your book. You can see it right there in the genitive, singular and plural. He killed his own friend. Or you could see the reflexive pronoun, amicum sum. And that would let you know in Latin, this is Brutus's friend we're talking about, the tragedy. He killed his own friend for the good of the Republic. Didn't work out too well, but you know what I mean. But if you were trying to say, let's say he killed Cicero's friend, so not Brutus's friend, but Cicero's friend, then it wouldn't be amicum suum with the reflexive, which brings us back to the subject of the sentence, but rather it would be amicum eius, somebody else's friend, not his own friend. So it's not so bad. It's not such a sad story. Okay? So reflexive possessives, what they actually do, just think of a mirror, they reflect back to the subject of the sentence. And the more complex the sentence is, the rule still holds up. So for example, Brutus thought that he, Brutus, killed his own friend. Both he and his would be reflexives. They wouldn't be your personal pronouns, which actually would indicate that it was somebody else. Okay? If you're at that level of Latin, though, hopefully you get that. So reflexive possessives, again, reflect back, just think to the mirror, they reflect back to the subject. Any other pronoun, like eios in this case, would reflect not back. And it's the same thing with like simple verbs. So like he, I can only think of Spanish here. He washed himself. Okay, we don't say that way in English, but he washes. Well, in Latin, that would have the reflexive pronoun se. He washes se, versus say he washes eum. In se, he's washing himself, like he's showering or bathing or whatever. With eum, it would be he's washing someone else, maybe his child or something like that in the bath, okay? So eum would be somebody else, whereas the reflexive would let you know it's going right back to the subject of the sentence.